I'm Michael Steele in for Simone Sanders Townsend. We're 30 days away from crucial midterm elections. Democracy is literally on the ballot, with hundreds of election-denying Republicans running for office. Are Democrats taking a winning approach to defeat these candidates? We're taking a look at the Arizona race for governor and Kari Lake getting the boot from a town hall for refusing to play by the rules, of course, and deadly new attacks in Ukraine in a war that's been going on for nearly 8 months now, after President Biden's warning about the nuclear threat posed by Russian President Vladimir Putin. How worried should we really be about Armageddon? And what will it take to end this war? Plus, in the regroup today, Draymond Green apologizing for punching his teammate Jordan Poole and saying he's taking a few days away from the team. Is it enough? You're watching Simone, and we have a lot to get to. We are only 30 days out from the 2022 midterms. Hundreds of races nationwide will determine which party has the power to govern in Congress, and which state officials will decide everything from free and fair elections to women's reproductive rights and health care. Early voting is already underway in several states, including Minnesota, Virginia, Illinois, and Michigan. Arizona, Ohio, and Georgia start in the next 10 days, with almost 30 more states following suit by the end of this month. In this final stretch, candidate messaging is more crucial than ever, and the slightest misstep could have national implications. This week, we've seen debate drama in Arizona, personal drama in Georgia, and some of the most competitive races boiling down to battles over abortion rights and democracy on the left, and crime and inflation on the right. Here to help us break it all down is our political panel. Charlie Sykes, my buddy, is an MSNBC contributor and editor-at-large for The Bulwark, and Reese Colbert is a political commentator and founder of Black Women News Media. Welcome to you both. So let's start in Arizona, where Trump-endorsed election denier Kari Lake is running for governor against Arizona's Democratic Secretary of State, Katie Hobbs. Now, Hobbs has refused to debate Lake, but the pair did agree to separate appearances, on the same town hall stage. According to an NBC News exclusive, Lake was escorted out of the town hall after attempting to sit in the front row ahead of Hobbs's appearance. To me, it seems like Lake is just doing the stunt thing in an effort to call attention to Hobbs's refusal to debate. Here's what Hobbs had to say this morning on CBS's Face the Nation. Let's take a listen.
I have no desire to be a part of the spectacle that she's looking to create, because that doesn't do any service to the voters of Arizona to hear from us where we stand on the issues and how we would govern.
Charlie, whatever Hobbs' intentions are here, I think it's a mistake not to debate Kari Lake. In fact, if I were her, I would stand on that stage, and every time Kari Lake opened her life, I go, and that's why you're not fit to serve as governor. That's why you're unqualified to be governor. How would you characterize this opportunity for Hobbs against Lake? And what do you think about this whole kerfuffle over the debate?
Well, Michael, this won't surprise you that I agree with you. It is not a good look to say that you're not going to debate your opponent. I mean, Kari Lake has some momentum. I mean, The Atlantic has a big piece that, she is, Trump's leading lady right now, which means she needs to be confronted. She needs to be exposed. She needs to be debated. You need to call out the craziness, the extremism, the support for insurrectionist, anti-democratic policies. You don't run away from that. It does not project strength. It projects weakness. And it's disappointing.
It is on so many levels. And if you thought we were leaving election denial back in 2020, well, you haven't seen this from the Washington Post, apparently. A majority of Republican nominees in races across the country, nearly 300, have denied the 2020 election results. At least 173 of them are running in safely Republican seats. So, Reese, we're about to see an onslaught of election deniers come to power across the country. How should the various states involved here be preparing, but how should we as the country be preparing for what is likely to set up an ugly 2024 cycle?
Well, I think that we're very ill prepared at this point, because even though protecting democracy is a top priority for both Democratic and Republican voters. Protecting democracy means completely different things, depending on what side of the aisle you fall on. And the bottom line is what we saw with the January 6th committee hearings is that the thing that stopped the overturning of the elections wasn't the Capitol Police and the insurrectionists being stopped in the Capitol building. It was actually people going by the letter of the law, people obeying the will of the votes. And that is not necessarily what we're going to see in 2024 if these election deniers, secretaries of states, governors, and people in Congress have their way. So this is a dire situation. And I don't know if Democrats are really, not Democratic leaders, but Democratic voters are really grasping how much is at stake in this election.
I think Reese makes a very good point there, Charlie, particularly when you consider what Republican candidates are doing right now. Across the country, they're hammering Democrats on crime. And in Wisconsin, no exception there as well in the competitive race between the incumbent Republican Senator Ron Johnson and Wisconsin's Democratic Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes. Johnson has constantly attacked Barnes on crime and even accused him of inciting the uprising in Kenosha during the summer of 2020. Yeah. You know, to Reese's point, this is a tight race with the Republican senator polling an average 2 points ahead of Barnes, according to 538. Here's what Barnes said in his defense.
Well, I'll tell you, in response to it, it's pretty rich considering that Ron Johnson supported a violent insurrection that left 140 officers injured. One was stabbed with a metal stake, another crushed in a revolving door, another hit in the head with a fire extinguisher. And that's just to name a few. And look, polls go up, polls go down. The reality is we're showing up everywhere. We're taking this directly to the voters.
So, Charlie, do you think the voters are going to buy that from Barnes, that strategy of somehow connecting January 6th to the much broader issue of crime?
Well, it depends whether Barnes actually pushes that line. He did at the debate on Friday night for really the first time. And, you know, the New York Times had a very interesting analysis how Democrats are worried about the effect of all these anti-crime ads. But it also said that Democratic leaders in Wisconsin had decided that they don't think it would work to run television ads linking Ron Johnson to the January 6th insurrection. I think that's a huge mistake, particularly since, you know, he is wrapping himself in the mantle of law and order. Barnes, who has some real vulnerabilities on this issue, and I've talked about that before, could really pivot the way he just did in that soundbite and say, okay, you claim that you back the blue. What about those 140 Capitol Police officers? But he needs to say it, not just in a Friday night debate that nobody watched, but in ads. And right now, the airwaves are dominated by Republicans and Republican-allied groups who are pounding on the crime issue, and Democrats have not pushed back. In fact, it was only less than a week ago that Barnes ran his first campaign raising the abortion issue. So at some point, there has to be some counterpunching if they're going to be successful in a state like Wisconsin.
Reese, Charlie makes a great point about the counterpunching because at this stage of the game, that's what it's all about. Because similarly, in the state of Pennsylvania, crime is also a hot topic. The Senate race there, the Democrats' best hope for flipping a Republican seat back to the blue rests with the lieutenant governor and Democratic candidate John Fetterman there in Pennsylvania. His lead against his Republican candidate Mehmet Oz is only 6 points on average, according to 538. But that lead shrunk after Oz's campaign ran a flurry of ads attacking Fetterman on crime. So how nervous should Democrats be and Fetterman himself be about the race at this point in Pennsylvania?
Well, I mean, I think no race is settled until the votes are cast, and I would rather be in Fetterman's position than in Oz's position. And the voters have shown, the polling has shown that voters actually trust Fetterman more when it comes to the issue of crime than they trust Dr. Mehmet Oz, despite this onslaught of ads. But to Charlie's point, there has to be more offense. There has to be more consistent messaging. Politics is a contact sport, and so unless you're First Lady Michelle Obama, you cannot go high when everybody else is going low. You have to get in there and play dirty. And I don't mean dirty in terms of lies and disinformation like a lot of the Republicans do. But I think Fetterman is a good example of somebody who's willing to trade barbs and willing to get his hands a little dirty. But he still has some work to do because I think with all of the candidates we're going to see across the board, Republicans are going to make a lot of ground by nationalizing the race and playing on people's worst fears. And the only thing that Democrats really have to do, I think abortion is the strongest issue to get that hook in and reel those voters back in and see what's really at stake here, as well as the voting and democracy issue.